We heard a child laughing somewhere deep in the woods. They hadn't planned to go this far. The trail markers ended hours ago, swallowed by the forest, and the map in Theo's hand was more suggestion than guidance. Moss and damp leaves carpeted the ground, softening their footfalls, but also hiding twisted roots that could easily catch an unsuspecting ankle. Mist drifted low, curling around trunks and fallen logs, hugging the forest floor like a living thing. Cora led the way, flashlight cutting a narrow line through the darkness. Behind her, Julian followed closely, scanning the shadows, while Theo brought up the rear, muttering about the wrong turn they might have taken hours ago. The forest was silent, unnaturally so. No insects chirped, no birds called, not even the occasional rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Only the faint hiss of wind through the canopy above, carrying the smell of wet earth and rotting leaves. Then came the laughter. At first, they thought it was an echo of one another, or perhaps some trick of the trees carrying sound. A high, soft laugh, childlike, pure in tone, threading through the trunks like it belonged there. "Did you hear that?" Julian whispered. Cora froze, eyes scanning the darkness. "Yeah, but it's far. Too far for anyone to be here." Theo frowned. Maybe a kid wandered off from a campsite? The laughter came again. Closer this time, rising and falling. A staccato melody of mirth that seemed impossibly pure in the oppressive darkness. Cora's heart tightened. No campsite. We're miles from anything. They stopped, listening. The mist thickened, chilling their exposed skin. The ground beneath their boots felt soft, damp, almost yielding, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. The laughter echoed once more, shifting slightly, mimicking a rhythm that sounded familiar, almost like Julian's chuckle from earlier, warped into the timbre of a child's voice. Julian swallowed. "It knows us. That's me laughing." Theo shivered. "That's not possible. No one should be able to." The sound came again, slightly ahead of them, lilting, teasing, pulling at some instinct deep in their bones. It was drawing them off the path, threading between the trunks, curving around roots, beckoning them deeper into the forest. Cora shook her head. "Stop. We stay together. Don't follow it." But the laughter had momentum, carrying the forest with it. Leaves rustled even when the wind was still, branches bent slightly as if leaning toward the sound, guiding it, shaping it. They moved cautiously, compelled and afraid, the mist wrapping around them like fingers. They came to a small clearing, moonlight just barely piercing the canopy. The forest floor was soft with moss, but unnatural indentations marred it. Small footprints, too light to be an adult, yet oddly humanoid. They weren't just scattered. They formed deliberate patterns, curves, almost runes embedded in the earth. The laughter came from the far edge of the clearing. It mimicked Theo's own nervous chuckle this time, and when Julian spoke, it repeated his words before he finished. "It's mocking us," Julian said, voice trembling. Cora scanned the clearing. Nothing moved, yet the shadows were not quite right. They twisted slightly, elongating and bending against the natural light, curling toward the misty edges. The forest itself seemed to lean in, closing the circle. Theo crouched, tracing the small footprints. "These aren't kids. Not real ones." The laughter came again, this time from multiple directions, overlapping and echoing. They turned in unison. Every tree, every hollow, every patch of mist seemed alive, reacting. The sound danced in impossible ways, sometimes directly ahead, sometimes behind, sometimes above, as if the forest was speaking through it, using mimicry as a voice. Cora swallowed. "It's luring us. The forest is using it." Julian's flashlight caught something small moving through the trees. A figure, pale, quick, darting behind trunks, never fully visible. Every time they tried to approach, it disappeared. And each time, the laughter anticipated their movement, drifting ahead, weaving around obstacles as though aware of every step. They pressed on, guided and trapped by the sound. Moss grew unnaturally thick along the path, roots twisting into arches and spirals, subtly funneling them deeper. The laughter became more insistent, changing in pitch, rhythm, and tone to match their own voices, echoing thoughts unspoken. Theo's breath came in short bursts. "It's learning us. I can feel it." Cora nodded, fingers tight on her flashlight. "It's not just a sound. It's intelligent, older than us, using the forest as its body." The mist thickened further, cold and wet against their faces. Shadows bent along their path, twisting as the laughter shifted from mockery to something closer to invitation. Teasing, coaxing. The indentations in the ground deepened. Small hands had pressed into the moss, marking lines leading to a faint rise in the earth, a shallow mound almost imperceptible under the mist. Julian approached cautiously. The laughter paused, then resumed, mimicking his own tentative steps. The forest seemed to pulse beneath their boots. Every movement was anticipated, every hesitation noted, the air thick with the sense of being observed from everywhere and nowhere. Cora bent to examine the mound. The moss had been pressed flat in symbols they couldn't immediately decipher, spiraling outward in a design that resonated with the rhythm of the laughter. Theo's hand hovered above one of the impressions. The sound shifted. His own voice warped into the high, thin pitch of a child laughing. "It's alive," Theo whispered. Or, "It's part of something alive." The shadows around the clearing grew deeper, twisting unnaturally, aligning with the symbols in the moss. The laughter came again, soft, insistent, now speaking in tones that weren't exactly human. Words they almost recognized, phrases half-remembered from stories or dreams, pulled from memory before they could speak them aloud. Julian's stomach nodded. "It's communicating. Through us. Through memory." Cora's heart pounded. The forest floor beneath them trembled slightly, a faint, rhythmic vibration, pulsing in time with the laughter. Leaves rustled, branches arched, roots curled subtly toward the mound. The mist shifted, curling around them as if to enclose, isolate, and guide. They realized, almost together, that the laughter was not a child. It was the forest using mimicry, memory, and sound to pull them deeper, to make them part of a pattern older than any map, older than any trail. Each giggle, each echo, each warped phrase drew them further toward the mound, toward something unseen. The pale figure appeared again, just at the edge of visibility. Small, fleeting, almost translucent, darting between the mist and the trees. Its movements were deliberate, orchestrated, perfectly synchronized with the laughter. Each time they blinked, it had shifted closer, though no path connected them. Cora's throat tightened. "It wants us here. Needs something from us." The forest responded to her words with a swell of whispers. Branches scraping, leaves shivering, moss shifting, faint breathing in the soil beneath their boots. The laughter overlapped her voice again, faintly mimicking, almost coaxing, almost warning. Theo's flashlight flickered. He raised it toward the mound, illuminating the spirals. The small figure darted between the symbols, pausing, then vanished. The laughter multiplied, echoing in impossible directions, layering tones and pitches that weren't there a moment before. Julian whispered, voice cracking, "It's not just following us. It's shaping the forest, the air, even our thoughts, around it." The mist swirled thicker, obscuring the moonlight entirely. Shadows bent toward the mound, roots arched like fingers, and the forest floor pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. The laughter, now layered with multiple voices, Julian's, Theo's, Cora's, resonated in harmony with the tremor of the ground, repeating, shifting, coaxing. Cora stepped forward, drawn despite herself. "We're in its pattern," she said. "We've been walking into it the entire time." Theo's hand hovered above the moss, unwilling to touch yet compelled to reach. Julian's eyes darted to the trees, to the shifting shadows, to the mist that now moved as if alive. The laughter swelled, and with it, the forest pulsed stronger, deeper, almost perceptibly. Symbols glowed faintly in response, spiraling outward, roots curling to create subtle channels and patterns beneath their feet. They froze, realizing with a sudden chill that the forest, the laughter, the mist, and the shadows had been leading them, shaping them, integrating them into a design older than memory. The child's laughter was no accident. It was a lure, a voice, a conduit, a pattern, and they had answered. The figure appeared once more, at the edge of the mound, still fleeting, still too small to be fully seen, its laughter layered with all their voices. The forest pulsed beneath them, patient, deliberate, waiting. Cora whispered, almost to herself, "It's not done with us yet." And as the mist thickened and the shadows bent closer, the laughter repeated itself, warped and distorted, echoing across the clearing. Come closer, the forest waited, and they could only follow. The fog moved around us like it was alive. The forest had already swallowed the trail hours before they realized it. Markers disappeared behind thick trunks, paths were obscured by fallen leaves, and the occasional glint of a branch wet with dew betrayed nothing of the way forward. A damp cold clung to everything, boots, clothes, hair, leaving them chilled in ways the sun never could. Cora led the way, flashlight slicing a narrow cone through the darkness. Behind her, Theo followed, scanning shadows that seemed too long, too bent, and Julian brought up the rear, grumbling about losing their bearings. The fog came silently. One moment it was thin, hugging the ground. The next it swirled upward, thickening around their ankles, curling past knees, brushing against arms as if reaching for skin. It wasn't the fog of weather. They had walked through mist before, but something else entirely. A weight, a presence, a sense that the air itself was considering them. Cora paused. The beam of her flashlight trembled slightly. "Do you feel that?" Theo shivered, rubbing his hands together. "Feel what?" "The fog," she said softly. "It's moving differently than wind or gravity would allow." Julian stopped as well, eyes straining into the gray-white haze. "You mean, like, alive?" Cora nodded. The fog had already reacted. As if in acknowledgement, it thickened around their backs, curling them in, separating them from the faint moonlight glimpsed through the canopy. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, twisting around tree trunks and fallen logs. The forest, silent for hours, seemed to exhale. Low, slow, deliberate. They pressed on, slow, deliberate, as the fog pulsed with every step. It crept under boots, around wrists, brushing at necks and faces in almost human motions, curling like fingers testing their weight and intent. Every sound, footfalls, whispered words, even breathing, was absorbed, refracted, and returned slightly delayed, distorted in pitch or rhythm. Theo's voice cut the mist. "If this is some weather phenomenon, it's interacting with us. Look!" He waved an arm. The fog recoiled slightly, then curled inward again, forming a hollow space around them. It was as if the mist itself was breathing, pulling and settling in patterns that obeyed no wind, no slope, no gravity. Julian's flashlight caught a branch bending forward. The fog swirled around it in an unnaturally tight spiral, as if reacting to the movement. "It's responding," he whispered, his voice trembling. Cora pressed on, keeping her steps light. Not responding, watching, anticipating. They entered a small clearing. Moonlight dappled through ragged holes in the canopy, weak and fragmented. The fog thickened immediately, pooling at their ankles, pressing against their legs, forming walls along the periphery that seemed to isolate them. Even with 3 people together, they felt exposed, small, observed. Theo knelt to examine the ground. The soil was damp, but more than wet. It seemed subtly shaped, molded in shallow depressions that formed curves and spirals. Tiny, deliberate marks, as if something had brushed along the moss. The fog shifted as he reached, drawing back slightly, then pressing closer when he stood again. "See that?" he asked. "It's directing us. Look at these lines, they lead forward." Cora crouched, fingers hovering above the moss. "Or it wants us to follow. Not just walk, but obey." Julian's voice was sharp, wary. Obey what? Who? The fog pulsed in reply, tightening around the edges of the clearing. It wasn't a sound. They couldn't hear anything. But the air vibrated, almost imperceptibly, a pressure that pressed on their chests and shoulders. Then, softly, a whisper seemed to drift through the mist, repeating the question they hadn't spoken aloud. Who? Cora froze. It listens. Everything we think, every word, every step. Julian swallowed hard, shivering despite the layers of clothing. It's aware. The fog shifted again, forming a tunnel that aligned perfectly with the shallow depressions Theo had found. It pulsed like a heart, drawing them forward, its edges curling subtly to nudge them along the path. The deeper they walked, the thicker the mist became, rising to shoulder height, obscuring the forest beyond, muting every sound except for the low, rhythmic pulse beneath their boots. Cora's flashlight caught faint marks along the roots and moss. A pattern, spirals and arcs, small glyphs etched into the damp earth, as if the forest had written instructions for them. The fog pulsed in rhythm with the patterns, glowing faintly where the moonlight hit, guiding, framing, insisting. Theo's voice broke the silence. It's an intelligence. Not a person, not an animal, it's old. Older than any forest we've known. It uses the fog to communicate. The mist thickened further, swirling at head height, brushing faces, brushing hair, curling like soft, intangible tendrils. Their reflections in the faintly wet moss seemed warped, elongated, echoing themselves, and Julian noticed that the fog seemed to mimic their movements, forming shapes just ahead of where they moved, anticipating gestures and steps. Test it, Cora whispered. Move deliberately. Julian raised his arms, stepping in a wide circle. The fog reacted instantly, curling in the opposite direction, forming a hollow space directly where he had moved. It wasn't coincidence. It mimicked, mirrored, and anticipated, reacting to intent. Theo swallowed hard. It's not just alive. It's intelligent. And it's watching us. They pressed forward, every step weighed with caution. The fog sculpting the path, guiding through subtle pressure and movement. The forest pulsed with rhythm, a heartbeat almost imperceptible beneath the sound of their boots. Every branch seemed to reach subtly, as if the trees themselves were extensions of the fog, bending and twisting, brushing leaves along the edges of their path. Cora noticed shapes in the mist, vague, humanoid forms, flickering, ephemeral, just at the edge of perception. They mimicked small gestures. A hand raised, a head tilted, a pause mid-step. She blinked, and the forms shifted, reappearing where they hadn't been, always anticipating, always watching. The path ended at a hollow mound, barely perceptible in the thick mist. The fog settled around it like a curtain, curling, pulsing, waiting. Roots bent subtly, leaves shifting to form concentric arcs. The glyphs on the moss aligned toward the mound, spiraling inward. Julian swallowed again. It wants something from us. It's directing us here. Cora's hands hovered above the moss, feeling the pulse of the ground beneath. It was faint, almost imperceptible at first, but growing stronger, aligning with the rhythm of the fog itself. They realized together that the mist wasn't just leading. They were part of a design, one the forest had prepared for centuries. Theo stepped closer, compelled despite fear. It's alive, and it's expecting something from us. The fog swirled, curling at shoulder height, forming a tunnel of dense, pulsating mist around them. It moved with intention, pressing against their sides, nudging them toward the mound, guiding every step. Cora whispered, almost to herself, "It's not done with us. It hasn't finished shaping the path." The forms in the mist flickered, almost indistinct faces, fleeting limbs, gestures that mimicked theirs. The glyphs glowed faintly, roots and moss subtly shifting in response. The forest itself pulsed, a slow, deliberate heartbeat under their boots, synchronized with the fog's undulations. Julian realized with a shiver that the fog had been anticipating their arrival the entire time, shaping the forest, the path, even their thoughts to guide them. The mound waited, the fog curled around it, and the forest breathed in harmony with the mist. Cora stepped closer, compelled despite fear. The fog swirled tighter, curling around her like soft fingers. She felt the pulse in the ground beneath her, aligning with the mist above, the forest shaping itself subtly around them, as if to prepare them for what they could not yet see. Theo's hand hovered over the moss at the edge of the mound. The fog tightened, pressing against his body, not with weight, but with intent. Every particle of mist seemed aware, shaping, nudging, anticipating. The forest pulsed with life older than memory, older than their own awareness. The fog moved in tandem, guiding, shaping, waiting. Cora's whisper trembled in the mist. "It's not just leading us, it's integrating us." The fog coiled, the glyphs glowed, the forest pulsed, and they realized that whatever intelligence had awakened here had chosen them as part of its design. The mist shifted again, curling, anticipating their next move, and the mound, still partially obscured, waited. And they could only follow. The fog moved with them, patient, deliberate, aware. And it had a purpose they would never fully understand.